Welcome back to the continuing adventures of the monad. Today, we will present an outline for the reflective contemplation on the construction of the Antahkarana. When reviewing this topic, it is useful to consider the fact that the process of construction concerns the handling of energy. What is the difference between energy and force? Ponder the distinction. It has been outlined in previous presentations. I will put you out of your misery by telling you that energy and force are related concepts but have distinct meanings. Energy is the ability to operate or activate things, while force is a method of transferring energy. Force is any action that tends to alter the state of rest or uniform motion of a body, while energy is a property of a system that is a measure of the capacity to do work. Force is a vector quantity, while energy is scalar. Now, think about these definitions in their esoteric context and where they originate from. The construction of the Antahkarana is a process that uses creative imagination. Something else to ponder. What is the relationship between imagination and intuition, and how do they both relate to the mind? Intuition usually refers to information arriving from the 47.3 subplane of the causal envelope. However, in the context of the construction of the Antahkarana, intuition refers to the energy flowing from world 46. Imagination is driven from the emotional envelope, and these two energies meet in the mental envelope. The take-home point is that the construction of the Antahkarana must occur through a thorough conscious understanding of what you are trying to achieve. We have reviewed the 6 methods used in the construction of the Antahkarana twice. Can you recite them all? Just in case you cannot, let's review them again and add a few more details to the processes. We start with intention. The objective here is to achieve the right orientation towards the soul and the spiritual triad. There must also be a mental understanding of the work to be done. It is not just about reciting the Om and somehow the skies will open to reveal the truth. The next step is to create the ring pass knot, gathering the energies that are held in a state of tension. To achieve this, the disciple must be able to think clearly about the process of intention that is being attempted. Once this is all done, that point of tension must be preserved. Visualization. We move on to a process that has been described as using creative imagination. Think of this as a picture-making faculty. To achieve this, the disciple must be in a position to receive and respond to impressions from world 46, found on the unity plane. Visualization preoccupies itself with the use of 2 types of energy. The first is the energy held at the point of tension, which was previously created in the ring pass knot. The second is the active picture-forming energy brought into action by the mind of the disciple. Projection. To project anything held as it is in the mental envelope, the will has to be employed. Not just any old will, but using a method that is appropriate to the soul ray of the disciple. This results in the simultaneous preservation of 3 lines of thought. The first is the awareness of the blended persona and the soul. The second is the awareness of the point of focused tension. And the third is the awareness of the ray energy in all its will aspects. This then leads to the projection of one of the 7 rays, which is appropriate to the disciple, and finally the use of the word of power. Invocation and evocation. Remember, invocative energy flows in and evocative energy flows out. The disciple blends the energies from the soul and the persona by invocation, and their united intention is expressed in the previous three stages: intention, visualization, and projection. This leads to a response coming from the spiritual triad. This is evoked from the point of tension by an act of will. Stabilization. After all the hard work put in by the disciple in the previous four stages, a time comes now to stabilize that work and begin to consciously use the newly constructed Antahkarana. Resurrection and ascension. We finally come to the last stage of the construction of the Antahkarana, where the consciousness of the disciple rises up out of the soul's and persona's limitations, viewed from the monad's perspective. The consciousness of the disciple now begins to move up towards the spiritual triad. Let us now look at these famous words of power, or not, as the case might be. These words are derived from the Senza language used in Atlantis. You are not going to find a Duolingo app to help you with pronunciation in this instance. The words of power cannot even be written down easily, as what would that script mean to you? The symbols used in the script refer to the pronunciations and the note that must be sounded forth. Now, in the days of old, when knights were bold, the pronunciation of these words of power was all. The game has moved on, and today disciples are taught to work from the inner planes of meanings of any word. This does not depend on the outer activity of the sound. Phew! Saved by the bell. When sounding a word of power, the disciple is not creating a form in the outer world. The activity is all on the mental plane. What is much more important is that the disciple feels the meaning of the word of power as they silently utter it. It is the quality of the disciple's idea that will bring about the right effect. Students are now taught that the Om sounded inaudibly and listened for is of greater potency than when sounded audibly. The disciple practices saying Om and not necessarily realizing that they are learning about the significance of Om. Let us digress here and consider the differences between these two terms. Om and Om are both sacred syllables in Hinduism, but there are some differences in the pronunciation and meaning. Om is a monosyllabic word that represents the impersonal absolute of Hinduism, while Om is trisyllabic and represents the three gods in three planes. The first sound of Om represents the start of the universe. The second sound represents the present energy of the universe, and the third sound represents the superconsciousness. Back to the subject at hand. It is always the thought behind the form that matters. The significance of the meaning must be understood. Think, feel, and silently send out a call of quality and meaning, sending form to spirit. Remember, the physical plane is not a principle. The sound pronounced on the physical plane will not lead to the successful building of the Antahkarana. It is the quality of a particular type of subjective nature, where the soul ray dominates the persona's ray, to that which is still more subjective, the spirit. Remember, from the perspective of the third, the spiritual triad, the soul nature is objective. The upshot of what has been said so far is that it is pointless to reveal a particular word of power that has some imagined magical property to transform the individual. It is not just about saying any word, it is about being able to hold the significance of that word in one's consciousness. The same applies to the word of power. Nevertheless, you are possibly disappointed that after all the build-up of these words of power, you finally don't get to see or hear one. To satisfy your curiosity, here is what the first ray word of power looks like when written down. There. Does that make you feel any better? This spelling of the word is useless, as certain sounds cannot be represented by either vowels or consonants. The word presented here, if correctly sounded, would form 3 words. What is more useful to us is what that word of power means. After all, we are being informed that it is a subjective understanding of the concept exemplified by the word that we are using, which is used to construct the Antahkarana. So, what has the first-ray disciple to do? They must follow the first 4 stages of the protocol outlined in the projection technique presented today. The next step is to attempt the fusion of the persona with the soul, achieving some degree of success. These blended factors have to be held in triadal light. This leads to the formation of another, more dynamic state of tension. It is from this completed silence that the act of projecting the Antahkarana is performed. This is when the impetus of the word of power is used. The symbolism of this word is what lies behind the Masonic use of the phrase, "so mote it be." In case you are interested, the word mote means may or might. When this phrase is used, the right hand is extended to signify the embodied will of the lodge. This itself is the symbol of the will and purpose of the Most High. What is more useful to us, rather than the random letters presented as the word of power, is what exactly this word of power means. It means, I assert the fact. These words have great potency when correctly understood. The disciple who utters them assumes and asserts the fact. The spiritual triad is a fact. The relationship between the fused and blended persona with the soul is a fact. The Antahkarana is a fact. The dual expression of the basic duality of manifestation, persona or form, and monad or spirit, is a fact. The will of the monad is the factor to be evoked. The knowing and purposeful one, aka the monad, can be depended upon to contact the instrument of its will upon the physical plane. The work is done. These factual assumptions are not based on faith, but on knowledge and conviction. It is upon these understandings that the disciple rests, acts, and depends. To understand the preceding 7 statements, you have to ponder the difference between faith and conviction. Faith is a belief in something without requiring evidence, while conviction is a belief in something based on evidence or personal experience. It is divine assertion that holds the universe in being. It is this divine assertion that embodies the summation of all knowledge and love. This is the technique that the first-ray disciple must use, drawing upon the divine prerogative of assertion. It is the technique of Shambhala. It is the right prerogative and privilege of all first-ray souls. In the next presentation, we move on to the second ray of love and wisdom. Thank you.